The FBI had an open position for an assassin. After all the background checks, interviews, and testing were completed, they had narrowed the field down to 3 possible agents. For the final test, the FBI agents took one of the men to a large metal door and handed him a gun. "We must know that you will follow your instructions no matter what the circumstances. Inside the room, you will find your wife sitting in a chair. We need you to kill her." The man said, "You can't be serious. I could never shoot my wife." The agent said, "Then you're not the right man for this job. Take your wife and go home." The second man was given the same instructions. He took the gun and went into the room. All was quiet for about 5 minutes. The man came out with tears in his eyes. "I tried, but I can't kill my wife." The agent said, "You don't have what it takes. Take your wife home." Finally, the last man was given the same instructions, to kill his wife. He took the gun and went into the room. Shots were heard, one after another. They heard screaming, crashing, banging on the walls. After a few minutes, all was quiet. The door opened slowly, and there stood the man, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Some idiot loaded the gun with blanks," he said. "I had to strangle that her to death."
Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson decide to go on a camping trip. After dinner and a bottle of wine, they lay down for the night and go to sleep. Some hours later, Holmes awoke and nudged his faithful friend. "Watson, look up at the sky and tell me what you see." Watson replied, "I see millions of stars." "What does that tell you?" Watson pondered for a minute. "Astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is approximately 3:15. Theologically, I can see that God is all-powerful and that we are small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I suspect that we will have a beautiful day tomorrow. What does it tell you, Holmes?" Holmes was silent for a minute, then spoke. "Watson, you idiot. Someone has stolen our tent."
This farmer has a garden, a cow, and 3 baby cows, but his cow kept eating the flowers, so he decides to move all of his flowers to the roof of his house. One day, the baby cows come up to their mother, and one asks her, "Mom, why'd you name me Daisy?" She told the baby, just a few seconds after she was born, a daisy petal fell off the roof and landed on her head, so they named her Daisy. The second one goes up to its mother and says, "Mom, why did you name me Rose?" The mother says that a rose petal came off the farmer's roof and landed on her head just a few seconds after she was born. The third baby cow comes up and says, and the mom screams, "Shut up, flower pot!" 2 Russians, a WW veteran and an oligarch, are in the same room in hospital. Both have been in a traffic accident on a motorway. "Okay, Gramps, why are you here?" asks the oligarch. "Well, it is a long story. I have had a Messerschmitt fighter engine as a war memento, and I decided to install it on my Moskvich. It succeeded beyond my expectation. I lost the control of my car on motorway when the speedometer needle hit 300 km/h. "And you?" asks the veteran. "I was driving my BMW on the motorway when a Moskvich sped past me like a bat out of hell. I thought my engine had stalled and I stepped off the car. Turned out it hadn't." 7 dad jokes to tell your friends. 1. Do mascara and lipstick ever argue? Sure, but then they make up. 2. I got hit in the head with a can of soda. Luckily, it was a soft drink. 3. How do you change a tire on a wooden car? With a lumberjack. 4. Where kind of car does an egg drive? A Volkswagen. And where does it buy gas? At the Shell station. 5. What's the most important thing an elephant looks for when buying a car? Trunk space. 6. This morning, I accidentally made my coffee with Red Bull instead of water. I was already on the highway when I noticed I forgot my car at home. 7. What's the difference between a hot potato and a flying pig? One's a heated yam, the other's a yeeted ham. So 3 nuns are in a car accident and go to heaven. And they're standing outside the pearly gates, and St. Peter comes out and says, "We've been having a couple of break-ins recently, so we need to verify that you're truly devout in order to let you in. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, very easy, no problem at all, just a precaution." So he asks the first nun, who's a novice, who was the first woman, and she says, "Ev," and he says, "Yup, you're in." And then he asks the second nun, who's a full-on nun, "Where did Eve live?" And she says, "The Garden of Eden." And he says, "Yup, you're in." And then he goes to the third nun, who's the mother superior. What did Eve say when she first saw Adam? And she thinks about it and says, "Ooh, that's a hard one." And he says, "Yup, you're in." A 17-year-old male walks into a drugstore. He says, "I've been invited to Christmas dinner at my new girlfriend's house. Afterwards, I hope there is a chance I get lucky, if you know what I mean." Clerk, "How about CDOMs then? They could come in handy. Here's a pack." The young man, after paying, walks to the door, stops, smiles, comes back. "You know what? The mom is also smoking hot. I think I'll take another pack, just in case I get extra lucky." Christmas Eve comes around. The boy sits at the dinner table, and the mom asks him to lead the family in saying grace. So the boy complied and starts praying and praying and praying. After a while, the daughter leans over and quietly says to him, "I had no idea you were so religious." To which the boy replies, "I had no idea your dad was a pharmacist." So, a woman enters a bus with her baby. When she's about to pay, the bus driver exclaims, "OMG, that's the ugliest baby I've ever seen." The woman, of course, gets furious, slams her money down, and walks angrily to the back of the bus. She sits down next to a man who notices that she is upset and asks what's wrong. The woman says, "The bus driver insulted me." And the man replies, "You should go and give him a thorough scolding." The woman thinks for a second and then says, "You know what? I think I'll go and do just that." And the man replies, "Great. I'll guard your monkey in the meantime." Detective Smith was known for his incredible deduction skills. One day, he received a mysterious letter that simply said, "The culprit is among you." Determined to solve the case, Detective Smith gathered all the suspects in a room and announced, "I know the guilty party is here, and I will reveal their identity." With a dramatic pause, he pointed to his assistant and said, "It's you, Johnson." The room fell silent, and Johnson stammered, "But sir, why would I do it?" Detective Smith grinned. "Because, my dear Johnson, only the guilty would have known I'm terrible at solving mysteries."
3 men were at the gates of heaven, but there was only room for 1 person. St. Peter asked each of them how they died, and the best story got through. Man 1. "I was adamant my wife was cheating. I came up to my apartment on the 24th floor and walked in, only to find my wife by herself. I was pleasantly surprised until I saw a man hanging off the edge of the balcony by just his fingers. I went over to him with a hammer and hit his hands until he let go. He fell in some bushes and was still alive, so I grabbed my fridge and lifted it over the edge so it would fall on him. And after all that heavy lifting, I died of a heart attack." "Oh, that is terrible," said St. Peter as he turned to the next man. "What about you?" Man 2. "Well, I was on my 25th floor balcony doing some yoga and I fell over the edge. I was hanging on by just my fingers when I saw a man coming over. I was so relieved. But then he started hammering my fingers and I fell in a bush. I was alive but very sore. He then threw a fridge over the edge onto me, and here I am." "That is just terrible," said St. Peter. "What about you?" he asked man number 3. Man 3. "Well, I was hiding in a fridge."
This is a story about a man. His wife has told him that if he ever comes home drunk, she will leave him. Nonetheless, he goes out. He drinks a lot and throws up all over himself. He turns to his friend and asks what he can do. His friend is helpful. "Go home," he says. "Tell your wife someone threw up on you, and put a 20-pound note inside your jacket pocket. Show her the money and tell her the other man gave it to you for the dry cleaning bill." So this he does. His wife is at first angry, but he explains. He tells her about the drunk man who threw up on him. He shows her the 20 pounds. She looks. "But why have you got 2 $20 notes?" she asks. "Oh," he says, "the other one is from the man who pooped in my pants." A guy is sitting inside a bar just looking at his drink. He just stares at his drink like that for half an hour. Then, this big troublemaking truck driver comes up to him, takes the drink from the guy, and just drinks it all down. The poor man starts crying. The truck driver says, "Come on, man, I was just joking. Here, I'll buy you another drink. I just can't see a man crying." No, it's not that. Today is the worst of my life. First, I overslept and was late to an important meeting. My boss, outraged, fired me. When I left the building to my car, I found out it was stolen. The police said they could do nothing. I got a cab to return home, and after I paid the cab driver and the cab had gone, I found that I left my wallet in the cab. I got home and found my wife in bed with the gardener. I left home and came to this bar. Just when I was thinking about finally putting an end to my life, you show up and drink my poison.